Hey everyone, thank you for tuning in to the second episode of Yes, You Said It with Michael Nevitt. Today, I'm going to be talking about the Pennsylvania primaries, which happened on June 2nd last week, and a few other primaries that happened across the country. It's going to be really interesting. It's a really important part in our political timeline in Pennsylvania and across the country. I wanted to acknowledge the Black Lives Matter protest that has been going on. I've been planning to put out a podcast episode every week, but I delayed for a few weeks because I thought it was really important not to distract from all the attention that has been getting. And please continue to, donate and sign petitions and all the other ways that people have been taking action. But I wanted to take the opportunity to reflect on last week's really important primaries in Pennsylvania. Joining me today is Owen Voutsinas-Klose. He's a good friend and the president of Penn Democrats. He's extremely knowledgeable about Pennsylvania politics, and we had a really interesting discussion. He's the first guest star to ever appear on Yes, You Said It with Michael Nevitt, and we're excited to have him. Thank you, Owen, for being here. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
So you ran for delegate in Philadelphia for the DNC. I just wanted to check in and see if you know the results.
Yeah, they haven't released results in 2 days now, so we'll see what happens. I'm currently the last place winner of the Biden delegates, so I might be knocked off depending on how Bernie does in Pennsylvania's 3rd congressional district. We'll see what happens, but obviously the ballot counting process has been pretty arduous, and doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon.
Yeah, it should be interesting. So since you bring that up, so before talking about the results, I wanted to talk about just generally about how vote by mail has been going. I know that it's taken a really long time for Philadelphia in particular to count ballots. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but I was just reading try to spice up my viewpoints a little bit, but I was reading a Wall Street Journal editorial about mail-in voting in Pennsylvania yesterday.
Is that really a spice for you?
And they quoted Rick Krajewski actually in the editorial, and he was really complaining about the mail-in ballot process too. Obviously, mail-in voting is a good thing. Don't get me wrong; we want people to be voting. I don't think it causes any fraud or anything, but the nightmare scenario would be going into November where the rural areas report first and Trump's winning, and then his lead slowly goes away in the rest of Pennsylvania, and he's crying fraud, and the Philadelphia city commissioners aren't prepared to be handling all the hundreds of thousands of ballots. So that's really the nightmare scenario. So I really hope that they get a handle on everything before then.
Yeah, that's definitely something that we saw in 2018, how there were a few swing seats where there were a lot of mail-in ballots for Democrats that took a while to count.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I guess that's something that we've been concerned about with Arizona, which is really predominantly vote by mail. But I guess really anywhere in the country we could have that problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, something interesting about this is that there was a massive partisan split in voting by mail in Pennsylvania. It was like somewhere around 1.3 million Democrats to 500,000 Republicans. And it seems like part of that is because Trump has been going against that for such a long time.
Michael, do you think that that's going to be a to the detriment of Republicans in Pennsylvania, right? Do you think that now they're going to have to turn out their supporters on Election Day, which they are better at doing generally, because they're all afraid to vote by mail thanks to Trump?
Yeah, I guess it's probably not going to be as difficult. Republicans, as you said, are better. And also just based on where they live, it's less likely to lead to large crowds. If you're in a rural area, probably less likely to, have a spread of coronavirus compared to Philadelphia, where we did see some long lines. And that's definitely something also that I wanted to talk about. There were really long lines in Maryland and DC. And Georgia, the Georgia primary is the day that we're filming this, and it seems like there are really long lines there as well. So there's a lot of concern about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's not going to be a good thing going forward. Georgia always has long lines.
Yeah.
They are really just not good at conducting elections in Georgia, honestly. But obviously, it's going to be super important. Not only, and I was just thinking about the importance of poll workers, right? I mean, a lot of them are elderly people who are more at risk to the virus. So people our age should definitely volunteer to be poll workers. They cut the polling sites because there's not enough poll workers, and when they need to keep as many as possible open. So to prevent those kinds of lines and that kind of crowding. So
Yeah, it was a big
that's
problem in Milwaukee a few months ago. They had like 5 sites when they usually have a few hundred.
yep, yep.
Um, yeah, definitely interesting. There was an article that I was quoted in the Daily Pennsylvanian that came out today about all the problems that have been going on with the Pennsylvania election system. So definitely check that out if you're interested. So yeah, I wanted to talk about an election that I know that we've been very focused on, the Rick Krajewski versus Jim Roebuck election for state representative in University City in Philadelphia. They haven't called it yet, but do you first want to give a little bit of a primer about what we're looking for in this race?
Yeah. So Pennsylvania state house districts are pretty small. They're about 65,000 people. Fun fact: Pennsylvania has, I think, the largest legislature, one of the largest legislatures in the country. Besides,
Yeah,
like,
it's like 203, which is I
yeah,
don't know how
yeah,
anyone
it's obscenely big. So this is like West, like University City and Southwest Philadelphia. So it's a pretty broad swath of like gentrified, like University City, and very poor parts of King Sessing, which is in Southwest Philadelphia. And I guess what stuck out to me is we have a DSA, Democratic Socialists, Sunrise Movement, kind of very left-wing candidate, who was by both those groups, by Penn Dems. He's a Penn alum. He's a former criminal justice organizer. Very nice guy, very smart, very good on the issues. He's running against an incumbent, Jim Roebuck, who's been there since 1985. And Jim Roebuck apparently had promised to retire multiple times over the years and just didn't do it. So everybody kind of got fed up with him, and he got a couple primary challenges. He's, dare I say, not the best. He's got a ton of name recognition, but he's not the best campaigner. He's really not like a very good speaker. He's not, he didn't really seem to be campaigning too hard to save his seat. And he got challenged by Greg Benjamin, who's a ward leader also, from Southwest, and then Karen Dunn, who's a former secretary to him. So we have basically we have Rick Krajewski, Roebuck, and then the other 2 challengers as well. Michael, am I leaving anything else out?
No, I think that was very thorough. I kind of see this race as a microcosm for what we've been seeing in Pennsylvania politics, and really, politics as a whole in the Democratic Party over the past few years. You have a young, exciting left-wing challenger taking on a long-term incumbent. It's pretty similar to a race that we saw in the similar part of Philadelphia last year when Jamie Gautier unseated a city councilwoman who had been in office for over 20 years, and then her husband for about 20 years before that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it looks like Rick Krajewski is going to win. It's hard to tell because they've been counting very slowly. But what kind of effects do you think that might have on Philadelphia politics if we have a result like this?
Well, West Philadelphia is really seeing like this tension between the Black political establishment, which is more moderate, and you can see so that's Roebuck and Jenny Blackwell, who was before Jamie Gautier, the city council person Michael's referring to. And these people, they've been in office for a very long time. They're very well known beyond, I guess, like the Penn bubble that we're in. And they have a lot of institutional support, whether it's from like the city machine or unions or ward leaders, that sort of thing. And as West Philadelphia gentrifies a lot, which is kind of a negative process, but as West Philadelphia gentrifies as a result of Penn, Drexel, the health sciences, that sort of thing, you're seeing a whole influx of white progressives, or I guess people who are not even necessarily white, but like people who are not from the area, move in and really shift the politics. And that's what caused Krajewski to win Absolutely. I mean, Krajewski, I think it's fair to say Krajewski would not win in like a 1985 West Philadelphia, or he would not win in 1990 or 2000 or maybe even 2010 West Philadelphia. But he's winning now, and the left is energized, and Gaudier won too, just because of this kind of shift that we're seeing.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's both a shift in Philadelphia and also just a shift in the Democratic Party that we've seen some election results like this across the country. And more election results like that in Pennsylvania as well. I wanted to go through some other state legislative results. So one that I wanted to talk about is a Pennsylvania Senate seat. Nikhil Saval upset the incumbent Larry Farnese. Nikhil Saval is a close friend and ally of Rick Krajewski. What else do we know about this race?
Yeah, I also, one more thing I want to know about Krajewski is he only got, I was just checking the results before this, he only got like 34% of the vote, right? So I'd be curious to see if he's susceptible to a primary challenge in the future. He did not come anywhere close to winning a majority of the vote. So he's going to have to expand his coalition for sure. But yeah, this one is very interesting. Saval is a very smart guy. He's written a couple of books that have been like published in the mainstream. Not even about politics, about literature. The New York Times also did a profile about him. But Farnese did have like a lot of institutional support, and by all accounts was a very liberal guy. Saval is running on more of like a socialist DSA kind of platform, and this is in a very wealthy, more whiter part of Center City. So where City Hall is, where kind of the neighborhood is, where those like Rittenhouse Square is, that's the district we're talking about. And the last thing I would note is that Farnese has a couple of he was indicted and acquitted by federal prosecutors a couple years ago for bribing a ward leader. So I guess innocent till proven guilty, and he was found innocent, but that definitely leaves kind of a shadow over his campaign for sure.
Something that I'll be interested in seeing is it looked like Saval did extremely well on election day, but most of the results are vote by mail, and it looks like Farnese is keeping it a little bit closer. So I'm kind of interested in the disparity between that. Another interesting race, kind of in a similar area for a state house seat, the incumbent Mary Isakson had a few challengers, including Jeff Dempsey, Andre Del Valle, and Vanessa McGrath. But it looks like Isakson is going to hold on from what we can tell.
Yeah, she had a lot of institutional. I mean, that was a field with a lot of talented Democrats, right? I mean, there's a ton of talented Democrats, and that's also a very politically engaged, very wealthy part of Philadelphia. And there was a lot of good people running there. And it looks like Isakson held on. She was kind of appointed to the seat when the old person, I don't remember what happened to the last state rep, but
Health issues, I believe.
What's that?
I think it was health issues.
Health issues, yeah. She was kind of appointed to the seat, and she won it outright with a lot of institutional support, including from the whole city machinery. Democratic Party machinery came right behind her.
Yeah, it should be interesting to see what that's like in the future. One would think that since she hadn't won the seat before, that this would probably be the most likely time she would lose in a primary. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, you never know. Maybe if all her opponents consolidated against her, then she might be in trouble. She only got like 30-something%. Another shocker to me was the Brian Sims election. He's a pretty prominent state rep from Philadelphia, but he's in a squeaker. It looks like he's going to pull it out, but it looked like for a while he's going to lose against Marisa Shaban.
Yeah, I don't know. From what I hear, I mean, he's a true political talent. I don't know if you're watching at home, Google Brian Sims and watch videos of him. He's a fantastic speaker. I mean, like literally one of the best speakers I've ever seen in politics. He's just incredibly engaging, relatable. We had him into our club for a welcome event, and we're not disappointed. But he has also gained quite a national following as well. he, you know, I don't know what happened, but what I hear, I guess, is that he pays a lot of attention to, not really to his district. He's more like he's kind of like has bigger aspirations. So that might be that might be it. Also, he's got a very divisive style. Um, you know, he became famous for yelling at an anti-abortion protester and accosting her in the street. So yeah, I mean, he's got a divisive style, and he's pretty. He seems focused on kind of like the spotlight almost, and maybe not his district. But that's just me offering some sort of reason why he didn't do as well. Michael, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, something that is interesting about this is that he kind of went against the establishment for the past few election cycles, but in this one, the establishment backed him and came to terms with him. So it's interesting that this is when he is having the most trouble, it seems like. Because
Yeah,
you think that, like, with his base plus the establishment base, that, he'd be fine. But
yeah,
yeah, I
yeah,
mean, should be interesting. I bet that he'll be a lot more careful in 2022.
yeah. And you brought up something interesting. I mean, like politics makes strange bedfellows. Back to the Saval and Farnese race, the this very powerful union. I forget what the union's called, but it's run by Johnny Dock, who's the uh, majority leader of the city council. He he's a moderate Democrat. He runs a very powerful union. It's either uh, maybe Teamsters, maybe some sort of like laborers union. He has this gripe with he has a gripe with Farnese because Farnese beat him a while back for that seat originally. So he spent a lot of money back in Saval. So just politics really makes strange bedfellows. Is the best way to describe it, and that was another interesting twist. The fact that Sims got some support when he was the one who actually knocked off Incumbent a long time ago.
Yeah, for sure. Um, so now across the state, there was an interesting election in Pittsburgh. I didn't follow it that closely, but Summer Lee got reelected. She's definitely on the left and was facing a primary challenger who was going at her from a more moderate angle, but she was able to hang on pretty decisively.
Yeah,
I mean, definitely, very good news for leftists all around it across Pennsylvania. And I don't know if you saw this video, but yesterday, as of the day that we're filming this, she was very involved in the Black Caucus in Harrisburg, taking over the dais from the Republicans and demanding action
yeah,
against police brutality. Also, another really interesting video if you want to check that out. Um, and another Senate seat in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. So Amanda Capoletti knocked off Dalen Leach, an incumbent who has faced some serious accusations. So
yeah,
it was, definitely an interesting result and one that, that we're happy to see.
yeah.
Um,
She knocked him off pretty decisively, and she got endorsed by Governor Wolf, Bernie Sanders. I mean, it was really kind of a lot of other state senators, which kind of goes to show uh, this guy Dalen Lynch's character, right? I mean, his colleagues are endorsing against him, so he's obviously and he has a lot of accusations. So a very bad guy, and happy to see him knocked off.
I'm glad that they were able to consolidate around one person. It seemed like I think there were 6 or 7 women who were challenging Leach, and there was a big concern that they would split the vote and that Dalen Leach would carry with like 30% or something. But
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, glad to see that they, found their person. So I wanted to turn our attention to a statewide election, the Auditor-General race. Really interesting result. What can you tell us about this race?
Yeah. So we have Michael Lamb, who's the controller of Pittsburgh, and he's running against Nina Ahmad and a bunch of other candidates, including Christina Hartman, who's I don't forget her title, but she's from Lancaster County. Nina Ahmad's from Philadelphia. She's a former candidate for lieutenant governor. She came in second place. Um, she's got quite a bit of money personally. So she's running to be the first woman of color elected to statewide office in Pennsylvania. Lamb has a lot of support out in Pittsburgh. He's the uncle of Connor Lamb, the congressman. So it's like a political dynasty out there, the Lamb family. And Lamb also got endorsed by Mayor Kenney, a bunch of powerful unions in Philadelphia, and the city Democratic Party. which would make you think he would do well in Philadelphia. But Nina Ahmad, who is from Philly, is carrying with 61% of the vote. She got endorsed by a lot of progressive types in the city of Philadelphia, including Councilwoman Helen Gim. I'm going to blank on a couple others. I think Maria Quinones Sanchez, another councilwoman, and she's really bringing up big numbers in Philadelphia and in the Philadelphia suburbs. So on election day, Lamb was ahead in the tallies as Western Pennsylvania came in big for him. But as Philadelphia starts counting more votes, Nina Ahmad overtakes him, and she keeps growing her lead. So she's going to be winning. She, if elected, would be the first woman of color elected statewide in Pennsylvania, which would be a great, it really is the old boys club in Harrisburg, and it would be a great, accomplishment. She's doesn't have too much experience in whatever an Auditor-General does, but she has a lot of experience. She was a kind of a spokesperson for Mayor Kenny, or either Mayor Nutter or Mayor Kenny, and she has a PhD in chemistry from Penn. So she's got a really interesting story, and we'll see if she makes it in November against the Republicans. But yeah.
Yeah, it was really interesting to see so many Philadelphia politicians, including the party, endorse someone from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, as you said, she's been cleaning up both in Philadelphia and in the suburbs, which makes a huge chunk of the Democratic primary vote.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, getting like 50-60% in each county compared to like 10% for all five of her opponents.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely will be interesting to see, and that'll be an interesting general election, unlike the ones that we've been talking about, because it is statewide.
Yeah.
So now there were a few congressional primaries as well in Pennsylvania. Christina Finello defeated Skylar Hurwitz in the Pennsylvania's 1st district, which is also Philadelphia suburbs, like somewhat bluish, but held by a pretty popular Republican, Brian Fitzpatrick.
Have you been following it at all?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't followed the primary that closely. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad to see that we have a nominee. I know that Scott Wallace ran for the seat last time, and he was not as popular as some other candidates might have been. So it'll be interesting to see. But he came very close to winning. He lost by like 1%. But
do you think we're going to blow it again, or do you think that we have a better shot in 2020?
I think overall people have been pretty pessimistic about this seat.
Yeah.
I don't know how much focus people are going to pay to it. I think a lot of like the election handicappers, like Cook Political Report, I think that most of them have it as likely Republican. Because Fitzpatrick is pretty popular, and it seems like he's gonna hang on. And he does have a few endorsements from like groups that you would expect to go to Democrats. I forget exactly which ones though, but he yeah, I mean, I definitely am interested in campaigning here. I think it's a really important place, both in terms of this congressional seat and also in the presidential election. But yeah, I don't have the highest expectations.
I think as sure as the sun rises in the east, Democrats blow Pennsylvania 1. I mean, Scott Wallace was. Like hindsight is 2020, but I don't think he was a great candidate. He was kind of like a Fitzpatrick's brother, held the seat before. He's a former FBI agent, moderate Republican, if you want to call him that. And he's got a great, he's great at holding down the district and staying popular and winning those legendary Bucks County swing voters who are probably going to go Biden Fitzpatrick. But Wallace was a very wealthy guy, pumped a lot of his own money into the race. Might not have been the best candidate for this district, and it doesn't sound like, from what you're saying, we have a great candidate, or not necessarily that, but it doesn't sound like this is going to be an easy one.
Yeah, it was a crowded field, and none of the candidates, I think, fundraised particularly well. So yeah, I mean, I guess it'll be interesting to see if Finello can boost her name recognition in the district. Another interesting race in Harrisburg, the Harrisburg area, Eugene DePasquale defeated Tom Breyer in a primary for a very contested congressional election currently held by a Republican.
Yeah.
Yeah, we really thought that Tom Breyer was going to pull this out on election night, but it sounds like there was one county that came in particularly late. I think it was York County came in pretty late for DePasquale, but it went for DePasquale in a big way.
Okay.
Let's see. New York Times has it at 61-39 for DePasquale, although there are still ballots that need to be counted. Yeah, York County, which is it looks like the largest county in the district, went for DePasquale 17,000 to 4,000 as of the latest count.
Where do you handicap this race in November? I mean, toss up probably.
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up. I think that it's a really good opportunity for Democrats. I think that DePasquale is a great candidate. You know, I mean, it was a little bit more lackluster in the primary than I was expecting. But yeah, I mean, he's actually the outgoing Auditor-General, so Nina Ahmad will hopefully be replacing him in November. But yeah, I mean, he knows how to win statewide. It's the kind of district that seems to be trending towards Democrats. Hadn't really been before central Pennsylvania. But I mean, it's centered around Harrisburg, and now that the map has been redrawn in a way that is more fair, I think that, you know, the Democrat has a good shot of pulling it off.
Why is it trending towards Democrats, out of curiosity? Is like Harrisburg growing more Democratic? Do you know, like, I guess, the geography of it?
I don't know it that well. I mean, I just fair. Like the general suburban, you know, swing. Yeah, I mean, I think that Harrisburg is like a pretty small city, but it's always been pretty Democratic. But like the places around it, I mean, you know, that's kind of like, I'm sure that they all went for Reagan, you know, in that time. But these are the kinds of places that, you know, we've been seeing swings across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he's a great candidate. So we're glad he pulled it off in the primary. But Democrats are really excited about this race. And fun fact, I think he's an like Ironman triathlete. So if you're interested in, I guess, politicians who are triathletes, he always like posts photos of his like workout regimes and stuff. So
yeah, it makes for an interesting feed.
He's a cool guy.
Yeah, really cool. So I wanted to turn our attention to a few other results across the country from last week. So Iowa, there were a few high-profile elections. First of all, Steve King, a very racist Republican congressman, was defeated in a primary. What do you make of that?
I mean, obviously, I think that's good news. A lot of Democrats were kind of hoping that Steve King would win so that they'd have a better shot at picking up the seat. I mean, yeah, but Steve King won in 2018. We don't know how 2020 will go. I'd almost rather just not take the risk and not take the risk of having Steve King in Congress again. So I don't know. How do you feel about that? Did you kind of hope that Steve King would have won so that J.D. Scholten could pick up that seat, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of my instinct. I think it would have been a tough go for Scholten. He came, the Democrat, he came very close in 2018, but I think it's just like a very Republican district.
Yeah.
And when you have like Trump voters going out there, because it's going to be presidential election, it's going to be really hard to get them to split their tickets.
Yeah.
So I was not optimistic about Scholten's odds, but also Randy Feenstra, who ended up winning and is probably going to become the Republican congressman from this area in northwestern Iowa. He's not really much better than Steve King. I mean, he's just like better at hiding it. He has a lot of controversies as well.
He didn't really hit Steve King on being racist. He was hitting Steve King on like classic Republican primary issues. So, I mean, yeah, I guess we'll see what happens. But I have a feeling that Feenstra won't be as much of a headache for Kevin McCarthy.
Yeah, for sure.
As Steve King has been. And that district is really interesting. It's basically very white evangelical. And in 2018, Democrats won. There's 4 congressional districts in Iowa, and the Democratic nominee for governor won 3 out of the 4.
And the Democrats in the House won 3 out of the 4 as well.
Yeah, but the 4th district, where Steve King represents, came in so heavily for the incumbent Republican governor, Kim Reynolds, who signed a very stringent anti-abortion law, that she ended up pulling it off. So It's a very, very conservative district, very, anti-abortion, very religious, and definitely an interesting force, I guess, in Iowa politics.
Yeah. So JD Scholten, the Democratic challenger, I believe throws like a 97-mile-per-hour fastball, which is really like that's like pro level. I don't know a ton about baseball, but I mean that would have made a really interesting congressional baseball game. Cedric Richmond,
Too bad.
yeah, Cedric Richmond is a Democrat from Louisiana. Like really takes over. I went to the game last year. It's really fun to watch. But imagining him and JD Scholten pitching together would have been, that would have been another level. Um, Another interesting primary, Teresa Greenfield won the Democratic primary for Senate to take on Joni Ernst for a high-profile Senate race. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I wasn't following this one too closely. I think she's a real estate executive. She seems like a good candidate, although I guess National Democrats have kind of been more keen on other recruits that they've gotten. And I think in the future, we're going to see, the Abby Finkenauer, the Cindy Axnes of the world, really. So these are new Iowa congresswomen. Really, Rob Sand, the auditor of Iowa. I think we're going to see them kind of start running for statewide offices. And I'm a little bit more excited about kind of the future of Iowa Democratic politics because we have these like already incumbent office holders who know how to fundraise and have some support already. But I wish Teresa Greenfield the best, and I hope she beats Joni Ernst. We'll see what happens.
There are a lot of good Democratic recruits coming up, but I think that Iowa is becoming a redder state, so it might be a little bit concerning.
Yeah.
So New Mexico, another state that made headlines last week. So Ben Ray Lujan is a high-profile House Democrat who just won the nomination for the Senate seat. What do you think about New Mexico for statewide?
Oh yeah, so New Mexico is absolutely going Democratic. I was reading Brad Parscale, who's Trump's campaign manager.
Really, Parscale? I always thought it was Parscale.
I think it's Parscale. I don't know.
That makes more sense. Yeah.
I don't even know. But he has this like weird fixation apparently on winning New Mexico for the Republicans. And I mean, more power to him if he wants to waste money there. Go for it. He's in short an idiot. He has no experience on campaigns. He was literally a web designer in Houston for Trump's like golf courses, and then Trump made him his campaign manager. So yeah, he has this weird fixation on New Mexico, but I mean, for all intents and purposes, Ben Ray Lujan will be the next senator from New Mexico, and then and then we're going to talk about, I guess, the House race, right?
Yeah, it was a really interesting primary to replace Ben Ray Lujan in a very Democratic seat in northern New Mexico.
Yeah. Well, we had Valerie Plame, who's the CIA operative that was outed as a CIA operative by Dick Cheney's chief of staff, Scooter Libby, and she had a great campaign ad. If you Google Valerie Plame campaign launch video, it was one of the best campaign launch videos I've ever seen. So I didn't really know anything
about it, but I remember like very strong feelings about that ad.
It was, it was great, but she actually is an anti-Semite. She had tweeted an article about how Jews are driving America into foreign wars. I didn't really know this. She apologized for it. I didn't really know this. So I was like, I wasn't following the race at all. I was like, oh, okay, Valerie Plame is cool. She'll probably win. But she lost. She came in third. So rejecting another, I guess, bigot to go to Congress. And do you know anything about the winner, Michael? Teresa?
I don't actually. I don't know if I had heard of her before the results came in, but I'm excited to see how that goes. So something interesting about New Mexico is that it's going to become one of the first states to have an all women of color congressional delegation. Presuming that she wins and that Deb Haaland wins, who's a Native American woman. And then in the third seat, there are two women of color who are going against each other in a very contested election. But either way, it's going to be all women of color from New Mexico in the House. which will be interesting to watch. And then I don't follow New Mexico politics that closely, but it sounds like there were 4 progressive state senate challengers who knocked off incumbents, including the president pro tem. So I guess that kind of ties into similar trends to what we saw in Philadelphia. I wonder to what extent it's like about vote by mail, or just like the changing circumstances in the country, or just in terms of general mood.
I think that for years, like these conservative Democrats, and this is like similar to the IDC in New York. I think for years these conservative Democrats in, I guess, state houses have been like coasting along, going along to get along. And after Trump, I really think that progressives have like woken up to these like state legislative races, which are super important. So they've come to realize, oh, these people are conservative Democrats. They're not like the other Democrats. We need to primary challenge them. We need to spend money, that sort of thing. So Trump has like shifted the Democratic political consciousness a ton.
Something I wonder, now that I'm thinking about it, is maybe because of the pandemic, it requires a little bit more creativity in how you campaign. And so maybe that bodes well for more creative candidates, while incumbents might be a little bit more complacent and might have older bases who might be harder to reach at a time like this. So Maryland, few interesting elections there. So there was a high-profile Board of Education election in Montgomery County, the DC suburbs where I'm from. Yeah, I mean, definitely read into this if you have the time. But there was a really contentious debate over the school boundaries, and to the extent that they perpetuate segregation. And so there was a somewhat right-wing demagogue racist candidate named Stephen Austin who ran for Board of Education, but he lost, which is very good. The top 2 candidates who are advancing to a runoff are somewhat similar ideologically and both support analyzing the boundaries to see if there are any changes that are needed. So it'll be interesting to have a upper level like policy discussion for this election that like either results I think a lot of people would be very happy about.
So are school districts run on the county level in Maryland? Is that?
Yeah, I think it's like the 15th biggest school district school system in the country, because it's all done by the county.
Yeah, that makes, I mean, I've actually been thinking about that recently. I think that counties should just run schools because I mean, when you have, not only would it save money not having overlapping bureaucracies, but I think that it would make in many ways make schools more accountable and efficient.
Yeah, I mean, something interesting about Maryland in general is that there is very little in the way of cities. Unlike Pennsylvania and I think a lot of other states, there are like only like 10% of Montgomery County, and I think it's pretty similar across the state, live in an incorporated city below the county level. I mean, really, the counties have all of the power.
Yeah, interesting.
So Baltimore mayor, one of the few cities, I guess it kind of counts as a county in some ways, but Baltimore City. So really interesting mayoral election. So it looked like Sheila Dixon, the former mayor who had some scandals in her past, it looked like she had won the primary to replace another scandal-ridden mayor. But it seems like the city council president, Brendan Scott, has pulled out an upset defeat at the last moment.
Oh, really? I didn't even see that. That's great. Yeah, Brandon Scott was kind of endorsed by like the Baltimore Sun, a lot of reformers, right? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't follow Baltimore politics that closely.
If anybody, always plugging The Wire, Michael, you should see it.
I need to watch it at some point.
I only care. I'm caring as insofar as The Wire has a character who's based off Martin O'Malley, and he, the Baltimore mayoral election takes center stage of 2 seasons of the show of The Wire, which is about the city of Baltimore.
And he's played by the actor who plays Littlefinger in Game of Thrones, who some of you may be familiar with as a very sketchy guy.
Interesting. All right, he's good at playing that. But I mean, Baltimore has a lot of issues. It's gone through a lot of mayors. A lot of gun violence, deep poverty, that sort of thing. So, I mean, best of luck to Brandon Scott, and hopefully, and the change doesn't necessarily just come on the city level, right? But hopefully he can kind of tackle a lot of those systemic issues, including
Yeah,
policing.
I think, yeah, especially now, there's been so much more focus on mayors than there had been, a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Um, and interesting that we kind of saw the same thing with governors as well a few months ago with coronavirus. Let's see, one more interesting election in Maryland. So to replace Elijah Cummings, there was a special election that Kwesi Mufumi, a former congressman from the Area 1, defeated um, Elijah Cummings' widow, Maya Rockeymoore Cummings. And he pulled it off again for the primary for 2020. So it looks like, going forward, he's going to be the congressman from the area.
Did he defeat Maya Rockeymoore Cummings again?
Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised about that. But yeah, I mean, I guess he has deep ties to the district and has a reputation of being a civil rights leader. So yeah, I mean, I'm interested in learning more about him as a Marylander.
I was doing a paper on the crime bill, and he was either chair or very high ranking of the CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, back when the crime bill was being written. And I think he was one of the people who whipped the votes in the CBC for the crime bill.
Really?
The 1994 crime bill. Yeah. But all this is to say, he's been around for a very long time, and he's a long history. And then he was the president of the NAACP as well. So he's a very long history in Maryland politics, and he's making his return.
Something else that's interesting. So Biden officially clinched the nomination with last week's elections, officially got over 50% of the delegates. So do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's more symbolic, right? Because he's now like kind of the presumptive nominee. Nothing can stop him. Yeah, it's definitely a symbolic victory. And it's funny to think about, where we are now compared to where we were a couple of months ago when everybody thought Biden was toast. So things have definitely changed. And Biden's looking really good for the general election, although obviously things are going to tighten up before November. He is, if the election were held tomorrow, it would be a massive landslide for Biden.
He would get like 400 electoral votes, it looks like.
That'd be awesome.
So looking forward, are there any broader lessons that, we think we could learn from this in terms of election administration, or how we should think about maybe the New York primary that's coming up in a few weeks?
I guess the mail-in thing is one thing, right? I mean, that needs to be improved. We need to figure out a way to count the mail-in ballots a lot quicker. Make sure that everybody can vote via mail, and make sure that there are enough polling stations open. We really don't want election chaos in November. I mean, obviously more left-wing candidates are doing well across the board. I think that's probably a result of people paying attention to those races, and giving them a good shot and trying to beat incumbents. And also just issues with the incumbents as well. So looking forward, I think that we can probably, the two races I'm most looking forward to are, besides my own congressional race here in New York 17, Jamal Bowman versus Elliot Engel. That's going to be a really interesting one.
Oh, it's getting a ton of attention over the past few weeks.
A ton of attention. And that could be a subject of another podcast. And then the Kentucky Senate race as well. Amy McGrath versus Charles Booker, for who gets to go and face Mitch McConnell. That's going to be another test of kind of the left wing. I don't know. What about you, Michael?
Yeah. So two other races that I'm looking for are your congressional district in Westchester and Rockland County in New York. Mondaire Jones is an interesting progressive who's looking to succeed Nita Lowey, who's a somewhat popular, very old, retiring congresswoman, but he's facing a pretty centrist challenger, and then a few other people. It's a crowded field. It looks like it's gonna, come down to a few votes, and it might be like 15 to 14% or something like that. And then there's also a race. I think it's the bluest district in the country, in the Bronx. Yep. There's a retiring congressman, and there are two main challengers to replace him. One of them is extremely homophobic and pro-Trump, which is very weird for a Democrat. But there's like he's leading the current polls at like 22%.
Yeah.
Just because it's a crowded field. But yeah, I mean, I'm interested in seeing the results of those 4 elections.
That one was profiled in the New York Times today. Good article about that race. And the guy's name is Ruben Diaz Sr. and his son Ruben Diaz Jr. is the borough president of the Bronx. But on the ballot, it just says Ruben Diaz. It doesn't say Sr. or Jr.
Really?
Yeah. So tons of name recognition. Everybody knows this guy. He's very homophobic. Very, he said that homosexuals control the city council or something like that, and they had to like remove him from all his committees. This was last year. So very just bad news. We don't want him in Congress, and that's going to be an interesting one for sure.
Isn't his son like pretty decent though? I don't.
Yeah, his son hasn't even endorsed him yet. His son hasn't even endorsed him. His son is like appalled by his father. I mean, like literally. I mean, honestly, I can't blame him.
Yeah. Yeah, we saw Ruben Diaz Jr. kind of get into it with Elliot Engel, who's the other congressman who we've mentioned. Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time. Always great to catch up with you and to recap politics. And yeah, I mean, I'll look to have you on at some point soon.
Thank you. Yeah. Look forward to seeing this on the air. Take care.
Yeah, have a good one.
All right, bye.